What's up, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Why Am I a Mets Fan podcast Extra Innings episode, Extra Innings edition. The Mets just won 5-3 against the Giants. That is a series sweep, y'all. It is getting really hot on that West Coast. Very excited to share some of the stuff that we saw from tonight with you. I have intern Dan here with me. Ashley is out on vacation, but we thought it was important to get this up because we know you guys like the instant recaps, and man, there's a lot to discuss tonight, Dan.
100%. I mean, this Mets team is looking really good, finally coming back to form. And, you usually worry when the team goes out to the West Coast, but it's been a pretty good start so far. Seven in a row, you cannot complain whatsoever.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think one thing that's worth discussing immediately is the fact that outside of the Soto homer, for the longest time we were discussing week after week how the Fab Four, as you're seeing some of Mets Twitter starting to call them, they were the ones producing on the offensive side of the ball. Now, besides that, homer by Soto, pretty lackluster from those top four guys, but the bottom was awesome.
Yeah, you're seeing a real shift right now in this lineup and who's kind of carrying the production. Because at the beginning of the year, when the Mets were really hot, it was those top four guys, Nimmo, Lindor, Soto, and Alonso, were the only ones hitting. And the bottom of that order was really struggling, which had made a lot of Met fans in worry because you saw the top of the order and you're like, okay, we need some depth if you're going to compete later on as the season goes on. But now you're kind of seeing the switch where even if those top guys aren't having great nights, which they didn't in this series and they didn't today, the other guys in the bottom of the order are really picking them up. And that's huge for a team that needs that depth to compete in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm just going through looking at the box score right now. Nimmo had one hit, Soto had one hit, Alonso, Ofer, Lindor, Ofer. That would have been the kind of thing where if you saw those stats even a couple weeks ago, you might be like, this game is over. Then tonight, you're seeing, I mean, let's just start here. Ronnie Mauricio, we got to talk about this. 4 for 4, two RBI, one home run that legitimately splashed into the water. Kayakers were fighting over that damn ball.
Yeah, a Ronnie Mauricio home run into McCovey Cove. Not only that being a big deal, being off of Randy Rodriguez, who's one of the most underrated relievers in baseball right now, is super impressive to see. And this was his breakout game. Ronnie Mauricio looked so composed at the plate tonight, and that was an absolute bomb down the line.
And
Although not a lot of people, there were a lot of arguments. People weren't happy about the call, the home run call by Carl Ravish, but that's just classic ESPN. But
yeah,
huge home run from Mauricio, nonetheless.
it actually is funny that you say that. I'm not here to roast other broadcasters or productions, but I will say I was very underwhelmed by a lot of the things they had going on there. So curious in the comments if anyone else felt that way too. But I'm also biased because I love Gary, Keith, and Ron, and I know that you do too. Beyond that, so yeah, so you're talking about Mauricio, right? I think something worth discussing here is obviously, ahead of the trade deadline, people are talking about who would be worth giving up. A lot of the times Ashley and I refer to the group of infielders as the quote unquote gaggle. You have some of those young guys in there. But, when you look at, let's say, Mauricio, Vientos, Acuna, Beatty, who are the guys who you feel like we have to hold on to? And is there anyone who you feel like the Mets could trade?
It's so tough to say because they're so different in their own ways. They're all completely different players and they all fill the same need. So you look at Vientos, for example, as the first one. That's your power hitting third baseman. You can't really move him around the middle infield very much. Kind of stuck at third base. There's been talks about him possibly moving to first, but even so, it seems like he's kind of stuck there. Whereas Beatty's more of your speedy defensive guy, a lot better, with the left handed swing, better defensively. Acuna's purely speed and defense at this point. But Mauricio is the interesting one, being switch hitting, having that build, having that crazy power too. If you look at it from who you think you can trade, I think Mauricio has the highest ceiling of all those guys, just because there's so much untapped potential there with a guy with that kind of size. But it's very tough to say. And rumors came out today, actually. I tweeted about it on the Mets pod account, how the White Sox, because the Mets have been targeting Luis Robert, the White Sox are strictly interested in Vientos, which is an interesting argument. And you can kind of, I put this tweet out and I said, would you be comfortable with trading Vientos in a package for Robert? And there was a lot of discourse about that because that's a tough name to give up if you want to go get him, make a big splash, and get a guy like Robert.
Well, what do you think? Is that something you'd be comfortable with?
It's so tough to say because you saw what Vientos is capable of last season in the postseason. You saw his ceiling. For me personally, I would be willing to trade Vientos for Luis Robert. I think you have that jumble or that gaggle, as you guys like to say, of all those infielders. You have to get rid of somebody. There's not enough room for all those guys to be major league players on the Mets roster. Someone's going to have to go. And as good as it is, you have to give to get. You know what I mean? Even if a guy has that upside, you have to kind of sacrifice that if you're trying to win a World Series. So I would not be opposed to Vientos going.
And honestly, I understand that, and I would have to say that I think, at least for now, I'm inclined to agree with you. Something that bothers me, even still now, is when I'm hearing people, and I think now everyone's more so on the same page. But for a while, I felt like there was a lot of discourse a couple of years ago, where, or maybe even still now, quite honestly, where some people are just feeling sort of reserved and they feel like they don't want to give a lot of things up. And I get that because you also grow accustomed to these players, you grow attached to people. But end of the day, the Mets are looking to win a World Series this year. And you can't lose sight of that if you're a fan. You have to think about what the Mets need right now and what they need to give up in order to get it. Like, now is not the time to be emotional about anything. You have to really think logistically about how can you get this World Series goal accomplished as soon as possible.
I definitely agree with you. And I think it also, too, the fear factor plays into it a little bit, especially when you talk about trading prospects and looking at the Mets history, because recently a lot of Met fans have been feeling that way about Pete Crow Armstrong, looking at 2021 when you traded him for Javier Baez, trying to make that big splash to try to get into the postseason. Obviously, it didn't work out. And now Armstrong's an MVP candidate on the Cubs. So guys that will happen where fans get scared to trade prospects because you see the glimpses and you're like, oh, if the Mets go trade him, say they go trade him to the White Sox, Mark Vientos will be an AL MVP in 3 years, and then you're kicking yourself.
Which I do feel like, I will say, that happens to the Mets at a higher clip than other teams. People do leave the Mets organization and sometimes become stars, but that does happen to every team. And to your point, there really is no way to predict that. Sometimes I
Not
think
at
you
all.
have to be willing to take a risk, and a lot of the times, not all, but a lot of the times that Stearns has taken a risk, even on a fixer-upper, a lot of the times that has paid off. So I will continue to trust in David Stearns and the organization. Back to tonight's game. Another person I do want to give a shout out to, not to say we haven't shown him any love, but still he's performing. Alvarez, man, I just got to go on the record here and say that him going down to Syracuse was the best thing that ever could have happened to him, whether he knew it at the time or not.
100%. And if you guys have seen me on this podcast before, I'm the biggest Francisco Alvarez defender of anyone that you'll ever meet. So I'm so happy to see him finally getting back to his free swinging form because that's what it was. You know, he was so in that 2023 where everybody fell in love with him when he hit 25 home runs. He was just swinging. He was just free swinging out there. And then the Mets coaching staff decided to try to turn him into a full contact hitter and try to have him use all different. That's just not who he is. It's not his game, and he was really struggling. You could see it mentally at the plate. He just wasn't all there. So to get that reset over at Syracuse where he dominated, I believe he hit what? I think it was something crazy. It's like 16 homers in 18 games or something like that. To finally be back in the major league, he's got his swagger back. He's playing with confidence, and it's really awesome to see because, for a catcher, it's interesting because usually in a catcher, at least for me, you value the defense more than you value the offense of the catcher on your roster. But if he's going to give you 25 homers a season playing like this, I'd much rather see this out of Alvarez and the average and the OPS be a little bit lower than him going out there and trying to hit gaps and really struggling.
I think you're right. I think sometimes you have to look at a player, see what it is that they're made of, what exactly are they good at, and what aren't they. And again, some athletes, especially at the pro level, are okay to change certain things. I think Alvarez is the sort of player where you have to look at him and think he is who he is. I think, to your point, they try to change him into something that he wasn't. I also think he takes some accountability for the fact that it really was a slump. Almost feels like too nice of a word. It did feel like there was something real going on with him there. And I think it just goes to show that sometimes when you're being sent down, it's not necessarily a punishment. Because look at him now. I felt like the Mets really needed this in order to bolster their offensive production. Alvarez was the piece that was missing, and I am 100% convinced at this point that he, has essentially won his starting role back. He probably never even lost it, and he deserves to be there.
It
Uh,
warms my heart to see Alvarez and Mauricio combined 6 for 8 tonight. That is perfect. If you can get that from those guys, you're going to have a good night no matter what, even if your top of the roster is struggling a little bit.
I mean, the kids are all right, especially being in Syracuse, just watching them, man, knowing that they have played together. It is. It's amazing to see that. It's emotional, it's heartwarming, and on top of that, it led to a Mets win. But the hits, the offensive performance tonight, not the only reason why. And another thing that we wanted to point out on this podcast was Greg Soto, relief pitcher, making his debut for the New York Mets. He went in the seventh inning and my God, I mean, he just one, two, three. I loved what I saw from him tonight. And I think one thing that Ravitch did say on the broadcast that makes sense to me is he said, when people think about, relief pitchers and deals that are being made, that's not, that those aren't the sexiest deals, which is true. But this is what the Mets needed. And obviously, one start is a very, very, very small sample size, but that's a lot of pressure for Soto to go out there. You're not even in front of a home crowd and you're, forced to perform right away. Dude, he stepped up. He really
Yeah.
did.
Yeah, no kidding. He shoved tonight. And it's very interesting because you look at Gregory Soto, and a lot of people, like you said, they see those reliever moves. They don't think a whole lot of it. This guy was an all-star back-to-back years in 2021 and 2022 with Detroit. And he is a very, very good pitcher. The analytics showing it's very good. He struggled a lot recently. He was kind of bouncing around. He was with Philly, then he was with Baltimore. Couldn't really find his control that much. But this has kind of been David Stearns' MO ever since taking over with the Mets. Finding these guys who have really good stuff, not a whole lot of control, and teaching them control under this pitching lab that we all talk about. So bringing in a guy like Soto is perfect for the Mets because he's shown he's got a great sinker and a great sweeper. And then they bring that in, you teach him how to control it, and things are going to work out perfectly well. And sometimes you just need a fresh start. Sometimes you just need some confidence. He looked very confident out there. And if that's what we're going to see from Gregory Soto night in, night out, he's going to be a pretty good contributor for this team.
I mean, really, I will have to see what happens, but right now, in the mindset that I'm in, he's the kind of guy where I think a couple months from now, you could look back and realize, wow, this is a guy that ended up being a large part of the reason why the Mets made a deep run in the postseason. It really was that critical of a piece to have, and now the Mets finally have it. But on the pitcher note, I also must say some credit to Edwin Diaz tonight. Tonight was your typical Edwin Diaz experience, man. The bases are loaded. Everyone's feeling like here comes a blown save. And honestly, I have to point out that perhaps with Edwin Diaz, there's been a maturation of sorts. Like he really seemed more mature out there. He stayed calm. He stayed composed. Mind you, he hit somebody. Mind you, he walks, whatever. Like that's just Edwin Diaz. But for the bases to be loaded and for him to get out of that jam, for Mendoza to have the guts to leave him in, I mean, it really showed me something that I needed to see from Edwin Diaz, not in a playoff situation, to know that in a playoff situation, he could be that dude.
100%. And this is the most confident that we've seen Edwin Diaz in a long, long time. So to put him in that opportunity, things have been going a little too well for Edwin Diaz as of late, where Met fans kind of saw that outing tonight and was like, here it comes. Like you said, he's due to kind of blow a save, but that's kind of who Edwin Diaz is at this point. He puts himself into those high pressure scenarios and then he figures his way out of it. The fastball's been working really well for him as of late. He just blew the fastball by. I think his last 7 pitches were all fastballs, just blew them by all the Giants hitters. And listen, it doesn't really matter how it gets done as long as it gets done. So if he's going to get the saves, I don't really care if he has to load the bases. It might give me and you a heart attack every single time. But if he's going to get the save, he's going to get the save. That's
It's
fine by me.
it's funny that you say that because I mean obviously most of our viewers know that we also have jobs, as local broadcasters. The show tonight was on at I believe it was like 10:24 and there are two outs in the ninth. Edwin Diaz, right, pitching, and I'm thinking in my head, all right, are we gonna make it on the show or are we not? And there's maybe 3 or 4 minutes left, and then he walks the guy, and I'm like, no, please don't do this. Like, I actually have nothing else to say or talk about. I need this game to end. And like you said, couple fastballs later, like when Edwin Diaz is rocking, he might be the most fun pitcher to watch in the entire Mets organization. Heat, just straight heat, bro. Not having Gary Cohen on the call hurts me, but really, watching him when he's at his best, especially when the highlights make it into the show, electric. Electric.
A little glimpse right there into the marvels of live television production. But something about Edwin Diaz that a lot of people, this is just kind of the nerd in me, the baseball nerd watching him, is the way the ball runs off of his arm slot. The way that he throws the fastball, no one has more arm side run on their fastball than Edwin Diaz, where it will start on the outside corner and run all the way up and inside. And it's actually insane. And it's so impressive to watch every time he takes the mound.
He's a really talented athlete. Ultimately, all of the things that we talked about combined tonight lead to the Mets' seventh straight win. That ties the longest streak that they've had so far this season. There are a lot of reasons and a lot of things that contribute to that winning streak. But to you, what's been the thing that's turned this all around? Because as you know, it was great, then it was terrible, now it's great again.
I
What's going
think it's
on?
I think it's the reason why it was great to start, and that goes to the bullpen. The bullpen at the start of the year was lights out. It was the best in baseball. All these guys, Garrett, Brazoban, Stanek, everybody was performing at such a high level. And then, you knew that things were going to come back down to earth at some point, and they did. That was that stretch where they went 10-20 over the 30-game stretch. They were the worst team in baseball because that bullpen was overworked. Getting that all-star break and now this bullpen being well rested and getting back into form, all these guys are pitching at a high level again. You saw it today. Adding in Gregory Soto now into that mix with Reed Garrett, who's already pretty good and been solid all season. Those guys playing with confidence. This Mets team might struggle to score runs here and there, but when that bullpen's lights out, you're going to be in a good position to win pretty much every single night. And that's been the case recently, and that's why they're on a 7-game win streak.
Hey, one final note. The Yankees beat the Phillies. I was a Yankees fan today. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Yeah, they were not helping all weekend. It was a really bad Friday and Saturday from the Yankees. They got their own problems right now. I don't really know what to talk about there.
Dude, it's a disaster class. I think they lost those two games combined by like 12 runs, like non-competitive baseball.
They just can't play defense. It's actually insufferable. I mean, they brought in Ryan McMahon, who's a really good pickup for them, really good defensive third baseman who can also has a good bit of pop for Yankee Stadium. But even that didn't help. But it was nice to see them get a win today, finally. The one time you need some help, right?
And quite honestly, McMahon was a large part of the reason why they won. So good trade. Congratulations. But I bring that up to say gives the Mets obviously a little bit of breathing room too, you know? I think that just the way that it's been the entire year with Mets, Phillies, it's been amazing and very fun to watch. But I think as a Mets fan, you have to know that the Phillies are right there, and it's gonna be that way for the rest of the season, in my opinion. I feel like no matter what with the Mets, even though, we're talking about in the beginning of the season how they're the best team in baseball, I knew ultimately come playoff time or even come now, it wouldn't matter. I knew that other teams would eventually catch up. And I'll be honest with you, I think even last year we talked a lot about the Dodgers, feeling nervous about the Dodgers. How do you get past them? The Phillies are a big concern of mine right now.
I don't think you can really be concerned about the Phillies if you're the Mets right now. The
Why?
kind of the way that things have shaped out this season, where the Mets jumped out to the early NL East lead, they were up by a good amount of games. Then the Mets kind of fell off a cliff, but even the Phillies, couldn't really make too much ground up on them. They were only up by, I think, a game and a half at most. The Mets have been controlling their own destiny all season long. And really, the Mets go as far as the Mets want to go. And as much as the Phillies, they've been playing good baseball, they're right there with you. You got to focus on yourself. You got to focus on winning these games right now if you're the Mets. Because at the end of the day, in this current situation, you kind of control your own destiny. If you're going to make the playoffs, if you're going to win the NL East, you got to win the games.
Well, maybe that's why I'm nervous, is because they do control their own destiny.
Yeah, you know what? That's a good point. I didn't think about that one.
No, but I see what you're saying. Listen, you kind of have to keep your eyes forward. Honestly, it's been a weird feeling for me to just be consistently looking at, the NL East and seeing the Mets in first place. I feel like that might be what's having me feeling a little bit alarmed. But end of the day, I think it's a good thing to be at the top. It's obviously better than any other position they can be in. So we'll just have to see if they can continue to win. Obviously, as you guys know, we will do our normal episode. Me and Ashley, just so you guys know, we'll be coming back on to do our normal episode. We're filming it on Tuesday. It will drop on Wednesday, but we just had to have a little bit of extra content out there for you. So, Dan the man, really appreciate your time. He has another internship right now, so he really came on and did us a favor. We thank him for his time. And just be sure to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe. It really helps us out when you guys do that. Other than that, thank you guys so much for being here. We will see you back here when the next big thing happens.